Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for Advanced Operations, Analytics, and Beyond. My name is Raleigh Gould, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Dennis Drogseth, VP of Research at Enterprise Management Associates. Dennis brings over 30 years of experience in various aspects of marketing and business planning for service management solutions. His primary focus at EMA is on business service management, CMDB systems, automation systems, and service-centric financial optimization. And before I hand things over to Dennis, I did want today's audience to know that today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback. Also, Dennis's new report on this topic is also available, and I will provide a URL for that as well. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Dennis Drogseth. Dennis?
Thanks, Raleigh. Delighted to be here with all of you and share what I think is actually fairly groundbreaking research. I use the term cautiously, meaning, or considerably, meaning that I've thought through the implications here, and I believe it really is groundbreaking in many ways. Groundbreaking because it's looking at an arena that's quite multifaceted with many, many different dimensions to it. And we're going to look at that kind of bigger roadmap in the research today. Before I get going, I'd like to mention, indeed, the sponsors who made this possible, all of whom have unique footprints in the advanced operations analytics arena. They are AppDynamics, AppInsure, HP, Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Prelert, and Splunk. All of whom have been great contributors in developing for this market as well as in supporting this research. The agenda is demographics first, who did we talk to and how did we select them? Technology priorities surrounding advanced operations analytics, organization and roles, success rates and benefits, and then a conclusion. I'll make some predictions at the end. And before I say much more, I suppose I should anchor this a little bit. The term advanced operations analytics is EMA's term for what some in the industry tend to call IT operations analytics or other terms associated with that. To some degree, both terms are, in my view, inadequate because they go beyond operations, as we shall see, to many other stakeholders as well, and the use cases are far from being limited to operations. And the data sets as well are not necessarily limited to operations. But since the industry is sort of anchored in that term, we're using it as well. You'll see for yourself what I mean as we go forward. We spoke to 252 respondents, to be precise. 150 were in the U.S., 102 were in Europe, and equally divided, 39 each, England, France, and Germany. We only accepted respondents who at least believed they were looking across domain analytics, so they weren't just looking at one domain or one tower, and they were leveraging big data in various forms to optimize IT performance, business alignment, or other aspects of IT value. We also required, at least in Q&A online for respondents, that they be either fully deployed or in deployment or with a POC completed or pending. So we were not looking, this is not a general industry research on sort of walking through Times Square, but every person would think about advanced operations analytics. These are for people already involved. So the data reflects those who are more progressive in this arena versus just a general population. The top verticals, we actually, for the first time ever since I've done research, we had a tie for first place and a tie for second place. First two were finance, banking, and insurance, and manufacturing with 14%. And then the second place for transportation and high-tech software at 8%. We had more than 20 verticals represented, and I would say many of them at around 5 or 6%, so quite a broad spread. In terms of size, it was an interesting balance with a strong representation at the very high end, 20,000 or more, as you can see, but also a substantial representation in the mid-tier and lower end. We didn't look at very small or mom-and-pop shops below 250 employees. And what was, I think, pretty consistent with the data, there were some obvious size differences, but advanced operations analytics is not only for the high-end in business, especially as many mid-tier and smaller enterprises need analytics to compete on a global scale with partners and suppliers and other interdependencies. This is hardly just a one-size-fits-all market, to use a cliche. We looked at a lot of differences between Europe and the U.S. I'm going to only mention a few here. One was that U.S. respondents at least believed that they were much more proactive in having AOA solutions deployed and more likely to favor software as a service. Europeans actually preferred a mix of software as a service and on-premise. So U.S. actually was more skewed to software as a service and or on-premise, whereas Europeans more seeking that mix. And for change management, Europeans were a little more focused on CMDB, U.S. more focused on application discovery and dependency mapping for change as sort of a reference point for analytics. And we'll talk a lot more about the relationship between service modeling and analytics further on. And I should point out in the first bullet, U.S. believed they were much more successful than Europeans believed they were, and that could be partly a cultural perspective on, what's success. But it did seem that advanced operations analytics was a little further along in the U.S. What were some of the technology priorities? So looking at domains, what domains were critical, and I should point out that the data here, the percentages are total mentions, so that, for instance, we had 53% were interested in security, but you see it as sort of in relative to the other percentages here, just for simplicity's sake, it's sort of the number one by a shade, beating out network and some of the infrastructure as well. We actually averaged per respondent about 5 domains of interest for the AOA investment. And again, that's typical of that sort of multi-use case, multi-purpose, multi-dimensional operations and beyond spirit. For technical triage, cross-domain problem isolation across the application infrastructure, basically managing services from a cross-domain perspective and isolating problems, not surprisingly, was the number one. And again, we're looking at technical triage. We'll have other more business-related and financial-related perspectives soon. Security was right up there as well, needless to say. Infrastructure issues with the network, very strong network representation in this data. Virtualized systems, ongoing issue as you move to internal and beyond for external cloud. Then triage across application tiers and middleware, and provisioning applications, time to value and provisioning services, you'll see crops up again and again. And then infrastructure issues specific to systems. Those were the top 7 out of a number of others as well. When we looked at business metrics, and business metrics turned out to be very important to our respondents as well. Again, putting a question mark in my mind around operations as a limiter here for what we're looking at. But the top 6 were internal cost of delivery for a service, okay? External costs associated with that bigger ecosystem of service providers or partner other issues where you're dependent beyond your own domain. Time to create and develop and deliver new business services, business process impacts, business activity metrics, service level agreement, which I would say years ago probably would have been right at the top. It's a rather more sophisticated matrix of business values. Some of the others, all of them scoring fairly high. Revenue through IT services, CapEx and OpEx savings, metrics for application usage and chargeback, understanding the cost and values of delivering applications, conversions for competitive websites for those in the e-business arena or e-retail, and supply chain outcomes. So all those scored actually fairly substantially as metrics relevant to advanced operations analytics. This is a list of heuristics and a little bit apples and oranges because you could have, for instance, self-learning combined with anomaly detection. But of interest here, a couple of things. Again, multi-purpose, we saw about an average of 3 priorities for heuristics per respondent, many more. Data mining, not surprising on the top here, especially as we'll look further down the road at how our IT organizations are beginning to pool data into data stores to optimize value for their operations analytics. I think a number of years ago, you'd see anomaly detection correlation at the top. It's still scoring well, and real-time predictive, of course, and predictive trending scoring high as well. So what were people pulling into the pot when it came to applying all this advanced stuff? What were their sources? Spreadsheets, a little bit to my surprise, and then not so much to my surprise after I thought about it, was the number one source. Now, spreadsheets are, of course, financial sources, but they're also where a lot of IT organizations may have data on inventory or other attributes in the infrastructure. So, and perhaps not surprisingly, it was a little higher with smaller companies were more spreadsheet-centric than the larger ones. Performance-related events. And I should add, all these sources are, aside from spreadsheets, are somewhat on the technical side. Now, we didn't say one of the options wasn't, for instance, asset data per se. Configuration data, log files, and access logs. So if you added log files and access logs, they actually would have beat out spreadsheets for number one if you added them together. Time series for performance management, which is different from events, right? So you look at trends over time. Flow-based data across the infrastructure, and transaction data, which is so critical, as I like to say, the transactional stage where you can actually bring together insights both on the performance of the service as well as the business impact and value of the service as well. So architecturally, this gets into what I was talking about earlier when I said putting data together in a central data store, aggregating data into Hadoop or other resources. A lot of this being done actually through the IT organization itself. So creating that huge melting pot. This is a relatively new trend, but it's a very fast-growing trend. Big data for IT becoming more of a data mining and data pooling process and simply investing in a smart tool by itself. Interestingly enough, most AOA respondents here wanted to integrate somewhere between 10 and 20 monitoring or other tools. So that, again, could be monitoring, it could be software asset management, it could be other capabilities, but they want to bring their other investments together. And this is really fundamental to, in my view, what AOA is about. AOA is about a layer over and above traditional monitoring and other tool set investments that can bring things together in unique ways and optimize those investments and allow for some tool set consolidation as well, potentially. And we've seen all those values when we look at dialogues and documented dialogues. Another association we wanted to explore was automation, right? If you're smart, then you can act fast and you can act faster, better, without creating train wrecks, right? You can automate train wrecks, and I've seen that happen many times. Well, advanced operations analytics provides you that, helps provide you with, anyway, that superhighway of vision. so that you can automate more intelligently and more appropriately. Workflow, performance, audits for security, network config, systems config, and app provisioning were the top automation priorities for associating with and integrating with AOA solutions. So one of the things we wanted to look at was, and I think this is unique to this research, I'm not aware of any other organization looking at this intersection, was the relationship between understanding interdependencies in service modeling and analytics, because interdependencies in service modeling is another arena in which you create that superhighway of visibility from a different and complementary perspective. So how are those two factors working together? So we started by asking about capturing interdependencies. What do you want to capture? And you can see, now this is, again, this is total mention. So it was actually about 13% down at the bottom, very small percentage. We're not interested in interdependencies. They didn't think they needed that. The rest did. They were interested, not surprisingly, in infrastructure to applications, number one, and then looking, number two, at virtualized environment, right? That's increasingly how are things moving into that internal cloud or virtualized data center world. And then and then after that, application to application, and infrastructure to infrastructure, and sort of down the line. So a broad set of interdependencies, all scoring fairly substantially. So top priorities, when you made to connect the dots between, gee, we've got interdependencies, how do we understand them, where are they, and what do we link them to? So we had an array of options here, and you'll see that the top, not surprisingly, was they wanted to have some kind of topology included as a resource within the AOA solution. That makes sense if you're in an IT organization. You don't want to have to spread too far. How that's done may vary and will vary a lot based on the kind of investment you make, but that was the number one priority, and that was actually a 40% voting for that. But you'll see close connections, 38%, almost the same number. We're looking for connections with an application discovery and dependency mapping capability that would support performance. If you go down the line, 34% wanted ADDM for change. Also very substantial, not that much different. So linking into that service modeling world was important. Tellingly, 34% also wanted connections to a federated configuration management system, so that managing change and understanding how change can be controlled and associating it with analytic insights was a powerful connection for them. 32% were looking for a dashboard for business impact, more for that executive viewer perhaps. And then 22%, I didn't list it here, were interested in specifically a core CMDB. So higher level for a federated system, lower level for just an isolated CMDB. Only 3% had no intention of linking with service modeling. Organization. Who owns AOA? Who should own it in your own IT organization? Executive Suite scored very high, and then Cloud, if you're moving to a cross-domain environment, came in next. Cloud is sort of becoming the new cross-domain service management group in many environments. I should add that when we ask who owns the purchase decision for advanced operations analytics, the Executive Suite scored the top number, more than 2 to 1 over any other group. So it's a top-down decision, and one of the things I'm not going to have a lot of time to discuss here, but that is quite relevant, is advanced operations analytics is also a way of transforming IT, just as investment in configuration management system is, so that people can share data differently, work together differently, have more efficient processes. There are cultural and process issues associated with these advances. It's not just putting software in a server. So having a strong having a strong capability for a top-down commitment from the executive suite is also important in succeeding with these investments as you move forward. We looked at a number of groups in terms of, based on tool set skills and interests, and I'll go through 6 for you. And I would stress that these criteria do 2 things. One is they show the multiple flavors of advanced operations analytics, and this is just a partial list. We took 6. The other is point out these attributes are in contrast to the other groups. So they're not necessarily absolute within each group, but if you compare security to the other groups, what would be the attributes that would sort of differentiate them? Well, guess what? They prioritize security values, no surprise. They were very consistent in that, I should add. They favored predictive trending. They looked for events and time series data. They looked for values with real-time insights and historical trends on IT services. We looked at ITSM and service desk. Not many people associate that with AOA, but actually the coming together of operations and IT service management is a huge and needed trend. Both can help each other, and certainly they were a major contributor to this research as well. Not too surprisingly, they were more skewed to the sort of asset and financial optimization, better alignment of IT service and business performance, because there's a governance factor associated with this ITSM increasingly. They were also perhaps the stepchildren here. They felt they were being left out the most and were marginally successful. Software development, a healthy population, very interested in advanced operations analytics. Not too surprisingly, they prioritized systems availability and performance. They were interested in if-then change insights, of course. Log files were key for them. Not surprisingly, integrations with DevOps tools, ADDM, application discovery and dependency for performance, and they were more interested in an on-premise versus software as a service offering. What about the application management team? Sort of a parallel group, but obviously more operation-centric. Prioritizing application optimization, problem isolation in systems, business events, which is interesting in terms of being able to show performance in business context. Time series data, no surprise there. App performance, no surprise there. Event management and operational dashboards, also ADDM for performance. And they were actually, this group tended to favor do-it-yourself type advanced operations analytics versus buying from a vendor. That surprised me a little, but again, it's an evolving market. Change in configuration management. Another group with focus and strong capabilities, as it turns out, because they're more progressive in linking that service modeling to AOA. Needless to say, they prioritize change and config more than the others. They were interested in isolating problems in provisioning application services, if-then change impact, capacity planning, of course, and strong linkages with CMDB, CMS, and ADDM for change management. And they were, as a group here, the ones who felt they were most successful with advanced operations analytics. The sixth group we look at in this, IT asset and financial optimization, also a very substantial group, linked in a little bit to the IT service management, but very much distinctive as well. They were interested in business activity metrics more than the others. CapEx and OpEx savings, no surprise. Application usage for cost. Business process impacts. Once again, if you want to understand optimizing assets and value, you need to understand what is value. So what's the business process impact of these investments? Supply chain related outcomes were key. And again, the CMDB and CMS integrations, as well as financial planning, of course, were key for them. They were the second most successful based on their own assessment of how successful they were. And they were most likely to look for a third-party investment in advanced operations analytics. A very important statement here that AOA and beyond is definitely beyond operations and also beyond IT, because it's a way of bringing the business and IT together. We had an average of two roles here per respondent, and those who had no interest in non-IT were a minimum of actually 5%. Here it's 2% because it's in relationship to the total. So almost everybody cared about some stakeholder outside of IT for these investments. Not surprisingly, business development and planning led the charge, and they got a 49% vote. So about half of the respondents wanted to see some linkages there. But not surprisingly, user experience management, which based on other research we've done is a key factor in bringing IT and the business together. And associated with that, online operations scored well, and line of business consumers and optimizing services for line of business consumers came in sort of all tied there at third. You can see a pretty strong group, and interestingly enough, supply chain came in fairly high, and even partner scored above 20% in the total as a interest level. Looking at success rates and benefits. So this is admittedly a subjective question, but I've often found that when you ask this kind of a subjective question, you get meaningful groupings. Whether the percentages are accurate or not exactly, the actual groupings tend to be fairly consistent in attributes, and you can look at them, and they make sense as you kind of go down and look at their association. We'll kind of look at that more closely. What does it take to be successful, et cetera? Most thought they were very successful. A few, not that many, thought they were extremely successful. And then a goodly number thought they were just successful, et cetera, and then marginally successful. So when we mapped this, and by the way, we limited this question to those who had fully deployed AOA and those who were actively in deployment. So we didn't feel it was appropriate to have the others who were, just in the sort of proof of concept stage even try to answer this. So you see the respondent base here is 176. And an encouraging note, those who were fully deployed were much more likely to vote for success than those who were just still actively in deployment. They were 3 times more likely to see themselves as extremely successful, and about twice as likely to see themselves as a combination of extremely and very successful. So it's good if you're fully deployed versus still trying to get the job done. You're more likely to be successful. What were some of the other extremely successful attributes? Well, by fluke or not, they were more likely to get a raise, so to speak. They were more likely to have a broader array of technologies regarding service management deployed in general, so they're a little more mature. They were twice as likely, in particular, to have service level management and user experience management, and they were 3 times more likely to have a CMDB or application dependency mapping for change as those who were not extremely successful. They were also more likely to be eclectic or broad in their use case choice, and looked at more cross-domain options and more non-IT roles, more active in DevOps, basically more broadly based. They were also more likely to look for service modeling related interdependencies. And the data said, rightly or wrongly, but the data said they were 20 times more likely to be very successful in cloud if they were extremely successful in AOA. If you were very successful, you were 4 times more likely. So there's, I think, safe to say that if you've got great analytics, your ability to move to cloud intelligently is much enhanced. We'll leave it at that. Some of the benefits we saw: faster time to resolve problems, not a surprise, tied with better optimization of IT assets overall. I think many in the industry would be surprised to see that come out in first place, right, with time to resolve problems. But it makes sense when you're looking at what you can do with that data and how IT is trying to move to a more value provider capability. Real-time insights and historical trends, correlation between change and performance, efficient use of infrastructure, faster identification of security threats, and less overhead in writing and maintaining rules because you got smart stuff that's some of which is self-learning, and that's also one of the AOA attributes. It's not about 20 white trench coats gathered around a pot of data, hoping to make something of it in 2 months. When we looked at DevOps and AOA, this slide sort of summarizes some of the key benefits there. What people were looking for, very focused on the development community. The top two were direct support for development and minimizing development's time and problem solving for stuff in production. And then others, most of the other three, look at moving into production as well as getting feedback about what's good or bad with an application to development. When it came to cloud adoption, similarly, we saw a broad range of values. Security, not surprisingly, on the top there, because the move to cloud has always been challenged, concerned with data security. And real-time application performance basically tied, really, 1 percentage point away here. With a lot of values for all these other features, I think the business impact and business outcome coming in sort of a close third is telling as well in the level of sophistication that a lot of IT organizations are moving to and trying to assess what cloud is about. So we were really multi-use case. AOA is not about doing one thing well. It's about having a modular or extended option to do multiple things, leveraging multiple data sets with good heuristics to support multiple stakeholders. And of course, that varies with different implementations and different investments, but it's not a do one thing only challenge. And in fact, we saw an average of 5 benefits per respondent. We saw some with as many as 10 or 13. And when we looked at breadth of roles, we saw an average of domain breadth of 4, cross-domain 3, and non-business 2. So it was an average of 9 if you added it all together, roles supported. So I'm going to end, as I said, with predictions. These conclusions and summary points, I'll skip over very quickly because we just talked through them. We looked at triage priorities, and you could see what they are. We looked for business metrics. Cost of internal and external service delivery were tops. Then time to create and develop new business services. We looked at heuristics, data mining, predictive for real-time and predictive trending led. Spreadsheets, still the dominant data source, but followed by events and log file and configuration data, and then log files and log access logs. We saw that a huge number, 80% are aggregating data into some sort of central data store, Hadoop or other. 9% in addition have plans to go there. Most AOA deployments are trying to integrate many other investments and tools and optimize those. And we looked at strong correlation with service modeling, including within the AOA solution, app dependency mapping for performance and change, but right on through Federated configuration management system. Executive Suite drives the charge, and AOA benefits are multifaceted. So I'm going to put on my crystal, I guess I don't put on a crystal ball. I will rub the crystal ball here, that's it, and look at the future. And here are a few things that I'm going to predict, and then we'll take questions from you. I think it's a huge area of growth with a lot of different vendors and differentiation. And of course, not every vendor is going to offer every SKU to all the use cases, nor should they, but there will be multiple use cases for each vendor. In the competitive environment, one of the things that will separate winners from losers will be well-evolved templates and fast time to value based on use case. So that fast time to value is right there, sort of embedded as an afterthought or connected with number 2. Again, one thing that's not going to win in this environment is 20 trench coats, 20 white coats, experts standing around a pot of data trying to make something of it in 2 or 3 weeks. A greater awareness of the linkages between the modeling systems that can bring insights together and advanced analytics. And the vendors that understand and know how to link those together creatively will be, I think, winners, and the IT organizations that do so will also be winners. Different crystal ball here, last slide. A renewed stimulus for process awareness, because adoption of AOA will also depend on cultural changes and habits and process changes, and that will be an important factor. It'll be a great stimulant to move to a more service-aware, value-aware organization. And that will come with more integrated cross-domain relationships, including operations to service desk, development to IT, security to operations, development in IT to business, and of course bringing the whole financial picture together for all of those towers and arenas. And last prediction, which is something that we'll be working on, I'm sure, in EMA in coming months once we catch our breath here, and that is the bridge between BI and AOA. I believe they're two related continents. Each one has its own unique history and value, and I think we're kind of waiting to define what that bridge really will become, especially as AOA matures and grows. And Raleigh, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for questions.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. If you have a question, you can log it now using the Q&A panel. You should see that in the right-hand column of your screen. Also, as I mentioned at the start of the event, this research report is now available. You can access it on the EMA website at enterprisemanagement.com/research, and I'll send you the direct URL tomorrow. Dennis, the first question is, speaking of predictions, one of the audience members wants to know, do you have any idea how large the AOA market is overall right now, and where you see it going in the next 5 years?
Well, that's a great question in terms of dollar value. And I would be, I guess the short answer is I don't have a dollar number for that, partly because when you do market sizing, you have to create boundaries and say this is, this goes here and this doesn't. Having said all that, and having said that we've not really done a market exercise, I think that AOA as both a core investment and as an opportunity surrounding other solutions that can participate in that investment is definitely going to be in the multi-billions of dollars going forward in the not very distant future.
Thanks, Dennis. The next question is, can you explain why you think the relationship between capturing interdependencies and service modeling is so relevant to AOA?
Sure. The goal here is to be able to bring sort of two sides of the brain together. AOA has that advanced analytic capability to understand and capture anomalies and insights that otherwise would be missed. The modeling allows IT organizations to understand interdependencies, and one of the interesting things about the modeling is you can link logical and physical, you can link service provider and IT, you can link owner, you can link consumer, you can start to bring many different things together through advanced modeling, and it's becoming much more dynamic. Some of it is virtually real time when you look at some of the embedded app dependency capabilities. So you're getting a kind of map of the world, and then you're getting that other hemisphere of advanced intelligence that can look and bore into that map, and bringing the two together is, I think, the wave of the future.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. Let's move on to another question. If AOA is executive-driven, how many IT executives are really sufficiently technical to understand AOA and its trade-offs?
The executive doesn't need to be the technical lead here. The executive needs to understand the implications for his or her organization in terms of how they can work differently and smarter and better. And they may or may not be, really into things like, self-learning heuristics or chaos theory, to take out an extreme. Probably not. But what's important is this is a transformative investment, potentially. It should be a transformative investment, and therefore, if the executive can stand behind the cultural and process values, they can get support on the technical insights and build and optimize based on that. So I think any IT executive who understands transformation and the value of transformation is prepared to be a good supporter for AOA.
Thanks, Dennis. Let's take one more question. Again, it's in that prediction vein. This audience member says, you showed a lot of different use cases. How do you see those changing over the next few years?
So that's a really good question. I wish I had a solid crystal ball on that. You see, I didn't put that up in my crystal ball predictions. I actually think that the ones we looked at, there were 6 that we looked at, will continue to grow, and I think the actual relative weight of each will maybe shift a little bit. Certainly security is out in front a little bit for now, and that may continue for quite a while. I think financial side will see a lot of growth, and that merging of things like service management and change and performance and DevOps even, you're going to see blendings across these values. But there are going to be other use cases that will emerge, and some of them may stretch more into the business alignment side with some of the business stakeholders, where you see very shared values and insights between optimizing business performance and optimizing IT in a near real-time matrix.
Great. Thanks for answering those questions, Dennis. And I wanted to thank the audience for joining us today. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback as well as a direct link to Dennis's new research report. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.